Kanalımıza abone olmayı ve bildirimleri açmayı unutmayın lütfen. Teşekkürler ve iyi seyirler.
The history of the Roman Empire covers the history of ancient Rome from the fall of the Roman Republic in 27 BC until the abdication of Romulus Augustulus in AD 476 in the west, and the fall of Constantinople in the east in AD 1453. Ancient Rome became a territorial empire, while still a republic, but was then ruled by Roman emperors beginning with Augustus, r. 27 BC, AD 14, becoming the Roman Empire following the death of the last republican dictator, the first emperor's adoptive father Julius Caesar. Rome had begun expanding shortly after the founding of the Republic in the 6th century BC, though it did not expand outside the Italian peninsula until the 3rd century BC. Civil war engulfed the Roman state in the mid-1st century BC, first between Julius Caesar and Pompey, and finally between Octavian and Mark Antony. Antony was defeated at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. In 27 BC the Senate and people of Rome made Octavian imperator, commander, thus beginning the Principate, the first epoch of Roman imperial history usually dated from 27 BC to AD 284. They later awarded him the name Augustus, the Venerated. Subsequent emperors all took this name as the imperial title Augustus. The success of Augustus in establishing principles of dynastic succession was limited by his outliving a number of talented potential heirs. The Julio-Claudian dynasty lasted for 4 more emperors, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero, before it yielded in AD 69 to the strife-torn year of the 4 emperors, from which Vespasian emerged as victor. Vespasian became the founder of the brief Flavian dynasty, to be followed by the Nerva, Antonine dynasty, which produced the 5 good emperors, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius and the philosophically inclined Marcus Aurelius. In the view of the Greek historian Dio Cassius, a contemporary observer, the accession of the Emperor Commodus in AD 180 marked the descent from a kingdom of gold to one of rust and iron. 9. A famous comment, which has led some historians, notably Edward Gibbon, to take Commodus' reign as the beginning of the decline of the Roman Empire. In 212, during the reign of Caracalla, Roman citizenship was granted to all freeborn inhabitants of the empire. Despite this gesture of universality, the Severan dynasty was tumultuous. An emperor's reign was ended routinely by his murder or execution, and following its collapse, the Roman Empire was engulfed by the crisis of the 3rd century, a period of invasions, civil strife, economic disorder, and epidemic disease. In defining historical epochs, this crisis is typically viewed as marking the start of the late Roman Empire, and also the transition from classical antiquity to late antiquity. In the reign of Philip the Arab, r. 244 to 249, Rome celebrated the 1000th anniversary of her founding by Romulus and Remus with the secular games. Diocletian, r. 284 to 305, restored stability to the empire, modifying the role of princeps and becoming 27 BC, AD 14, Augustus. Further information: Praetorian Guard, Roman Triumph, Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, Arminius, and Publius Quinctilius Varus. The Battle of Actium, by Loris a Castro, 1672. Octavian, the grandnephew and adopted son of Julius Caesar, had made himself a central military figure during the chaotic period following Caesar's assassination. In 43 BC, at the age of 20, he became one of the three members of the Second Triumvirate, a political alliance with Marcus Lepidus and Mark Antony. Octavian and Antony defeated the last of Caesar's assassins in 42 BC at the Battle of Philippi, although after this point, tensions began to rise between the two. The triumvirate ended in 32 BC, torn apart by the competing ambitions of its members. Lepidus was forced into exile, and Antony, who had allied himself with his lover Queen Cleopatra VII of Egypt, committed suicide in 30 BC following his defeat at the Battle of Actium, 31 BC, by the fleet of Octavian. Octavian subsequently annexed Egypt to the empire. Now sole ruler of Rome, Octavian began a full-scale reformation of military, fiscal, and political matters. The Senate granted him power over appointing its membership and several successive consulships, allowing Augustus to operate within the existing constitutional machinery, and thus reject titles that Romans associated with monarchy, such as rex, king. The dictatorship, a military office in the early republic typically lasting only for the 6-month military campaigning season, had been resurrected first by Sulla in the late 80s BC, and then by Julius Caesar in the mid-40s. The title dictator was never again used. As the adopted heir of Julius Caesar, Augustus had taken Caesar as a component of his name, and handed down the name to his heirs of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. With Vespasian, one of the first emperors outside the dynasty, Caesar evolved from a family name to the imperial title Caesar. Augustus created his novel and historically unique position by consolidating the constitutional powers of several republican offices. He renounced his consulship in 23 BC, but retained his consular imperium, leading to a second compromise between Augustus and the Senate known as the Second Settlement. Augustus was granted the authority of a tribune, tribunicia potestas, though not the title, which allowed him to call together the Senate and people at will and lay business before it, veto the actions of either the Assembly or the Senate, preside over elections, and it gave him the right to speak first at any meeting. Also included in Augustus's tribunician authority were powers usually reserved for the Roman censor. These included the right to supervise public morals and scrutinize laws to ensure they were in the public interest, as well as the ability to hold a census and determine the membership of the Senate. No tribune of Rome ever had these powers, and there was no precedent within the Roman system for consolidating the powers. Left image, a Roman fresco from Pompeii showing a Maenad in silk dress, 1st century AD. Right image, a fresco of a young man from the Villa di Ariana, Stabii, 1st century AD. The Augustan age is not as well documented as the age of Caesar and Cicero. Livy wrote his history during Augustus's reign and covered all of Roman history through to 9 BC, but only epitomes survive of his coverage of the late Republican and Augustan periods. Important primary sources for the Augustan period include Residential Gesti Divi Augusti, Augustus's highly partisan autobiography. Historiae Romani by Velius Paterculus, the best annals of the Augustan period. Controversiae and Suasorii of Seneca the Elder. Works of poetry such as Ovid's Fasti and Propertius's fourth book, Legislation, and Engineering also provide important insights into Roman life of the time. Archaeology, including maritime archaeology, aerial surveys, epigraphic inscriptions on buildings, and Augustan coinage, has also provided valuable evidence about economic, social, and military conditions. Secondary ancient sources on the Augustan age include Tacitus, Dio Cassius, Plutarch, and Lives of the 12 Caesars by Suetonius. Josephus's Jewish Antiquities is the important source for Judea, which became a province during Augustus's reign. 14 to 68, Julio-Claudian dynasty. Augustus had 3 grandsons by his daughter Julia the Elder, Gaius Caesar, Lucius Caesar, and Agrippa Postumus. None of the 3 lived long enough to succeed him. He therefore was succeeded by his stepson Tiberius. Tiberius was the son of Livia, the third wife of Octavian, by her first marriage to Tiberius Nero. Augustus was a scion of the gens Julia, the Julian family, one of the most ancient patrician clans of Rome, while Tiberius was a scion of the gens Claudia, only slightly less ancient than the Julians. Their three immediate successors were all descended both from the gens Claudia, through Tiberius' brother Nero Claudius Drusus, and from gens Julia, either through Julia the Elder, Augustus' daughter from his first marriage, Caligula and Nero, or through Augustus' sister Octavia Minor, Claudius. Historians thus refer to their dynasty as Julio-Claudian. 14–37, Tiberius. The early years of Tiberius's reign were relatively peaceful. Tiberius secured the overall power of Rome and enriched its treasury. However, his rule soon became characterized by paranoia. He began a series of treason trials and executions, which continued until his death in 37–23. He left power in the hands of the commander of the guard, Lucius Aelius Sejanus. Tiberius himself retired to live at his villa on the island of Capri in 26, leaving administration in the hands of Sejanus, who carried on the persecutions with contentment. Sejanus also began to consolidate his own power. In 31 he was named co-consul with Tiberius and married Livilla, the emperor's niece. At this point he was hoisted by his own petard, the emperor's paranoia, which he had so ably exploited for his own gain, turned against him. Sejanus was put to death, along with many of his associates, the same year. The persecutions continued until Tiberius' death in 37. 37–41, Caligula. At the time of Tiberius's death most of the people who might have succeeded him had been killed. The logical successor, and Tiberius' own choice, was his 24-year-old grandnephew, Gaius, better known as Caligula, Little Boots. Caligula was a son of Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder. His paternal grandparents were Nero Claudius Drusus and Antonia Minor, and his maternal grandparents were Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa and Julia the Elder. He was thus a descendant of both Augustus and Livia. Caligula started out well, by putting an end to the persecutions and burning his uncle's records. Unfortunately, he quickly lapsed into illness. The Caligula that emerged in late 37 demonstrated features of mental instability that led modern commentators to diagnose him with such illnesses as encephalitis, which can cause mental derangement, hyperthyroidism, or even a nervous breakdown, perhaps brought on by the stress of his position. Whatever the cause, there was an obvious shift in his reign from this point on, leading his biographers to label him as insane. Most of what history remembers of Caligula comes from Suetonius, in his book Lives of the 12 Caesars. According to Suetonius, Caligula once planned to appoint his favorite horse Incitatus to the Roman Senate. He ordered his soldiers to invade Britain to fight the sea god Neptune, but changed his mind at the last minute, and had them pick seashells on the northern end of France instead. It is believed he carried on incestuous relations with his three sisters, Julia Livilla, Drusilla, and Agrippina the Younger. He ordered a statue of himself to be erected in Herod's temple at Jerusalem, which would have undoubtedly led to revolt had he not been dissuaded from this plan by his friend King Agrippa I. He ordered people to be secretly killed, and then called them to his palace. When they did not appear, he would jokingly remark that they must have committed suicide. In 41, Caligula was assassinated by the commander of the guard Cassius Chaerea. Also killed were his fourth wife Caesonia, and their daughter Julia Drusilla. For 2 days following his assassination, the Senate debated the merits of restoring the Republic.